All right, and it looks like we're live. Hey everybody, Tamara here, and welcome to Writer's Workshop, where we talk about books on writing. And this month we are talking about. Oh, let me pause that. The thing started playing automatically. Anyway, and this month we're talking about The Last 50 Pages by James Scott Bell. And ladies, introduce yourselves, and I'll tweet this link out.
Okay, well, I'm Amber Kraft. I write paranormal romance, and yeah, I don't know. That's me.
I'm CJ Bloyer, and I write several genres, so things.
And I'm Tamara Woods, and I am currently writing a lot of cozy mysteries. And I started this whole monthly thing as a way to start reading through my how to write TBR list, because I kept collecting books, but I wasn't reading any of them. So we're not going to go through every single point of the book, because I don't really think that is a good way for you to learn anything. Because if it's helpful, then I want you to pick it up and read it. So the link is in the description for the book if you haven't read it. And if you listen to us and you decide it sounds like a good option for you. So let's talk about, before we dive into the book, let's talk about the endings of our books. Like, do you have a problem with ending your work, whether it's a book or short story, what have you? Is it hard for you to find an ending?
Yes.
It depends.
I don't know that I've ever actually finished a novel. Like, I get to the end and I'm like, I have no idea how to wrap this up. So
it depends on how I'm writing the story. Like for Unknown Love, I imagined the ending, so it was just writing to that and making it all mesh together. But for Unknown Family, I had a hard time like not repeating myself because it's a last battle type thing. So yeah, I guess it just depends.
And I've learned how to end things, but I felt like I wasn't sure if I was doing the best job that I could be doing. And I just wanted to learn how to get better at it, essentially. So I thought that this would be a good option, because we've read books about, doing the newsletter stuff and about the writer's health, but we haven't done a lot of craft books. So I thought that would be a good course, and this is what we voted on this month, so this is what we're doing.
Well, and can I say, like, the difference, I already had this book and I had already read it when I first started with Unknown Love, and like just rereading it, having had the experience of trying to end a book was totally more eye-opening, I guess. So for people that like have the book or are reading the book later, like if you reread it when you're getting to the end, because it will make so much more sense than just reading it before you do that.
Well, that's an interesting point. I hadn't read it before, so I can't speak from that. I can speak from me trying to change the ending of my current book that I've been editing for 3 years, it feels like. And yeah, I felt like I've been spinning my wheels a little bit with it. So I was happy to start reading this book. I didn't realize how many writing books he has. Did you check out he's written 18 writing books.
Yeah, I only knew of like 5.
I was like, holy crap. Okay, well.
Yeah.
Hopefully you know what you're talking about, because you're talking about it a lot.
Well, yeah, and then when he referenced a couple of his other books, I'm like, well, now I really want to go read that, because that makes sense.
Right?
That, at first, it kind of threw me off, because he was like self-promoting a lot in his book. But then when I looked and saw how many he's written, I was like, well, okay. That, I mean,
it makes sense.
Fine, that's fine. That's acceptable. Yeah.
Like, seriously, you've almost written 20 books about writing. Yeah, I guess you could talk about it. Okay. I liked how he began with talking about Lost, because I didn't watch Lost because I was really suspicious and I'd already been burned by the X-Files. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to go through a whole another thing where at the end I'm still like, what happened? And everyone was so angry at the end of Lost. Like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I knew maybe 2 people who were satisfied that it was still a mystery. They were like, yes, it made sense for the story. And everyone else was like, burn the witch.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched the first 2 episodes with my mom, and I was like, I can already tell you this is not going to have the ending you want it to have, so I'm just not going to watch.
I was like, you guys aren't you're not tricking me. I've been tricked before. I've been hurt in this game.
I did not watch Lost, but I don't know that it was a conscious decision not to watch it. I think it was, I don't know, was it on HBO? Or was it on primetime? Or
I think it was on primetime.
Yeah. It had to have been on primetime. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. That was not a show. And to be fair, like, I can count the number of shows that I watched as a TV series on like one hand. Like, so I'm not like, that's not really my mode, but I do remember people being angry about it. In fact, I watched a YouTube video the other night about, it was about Game of Thrones, ending for Game of Thrones, and she compared Game of Thrones and Lost and The Sopranos. I think those are the 3 that she looked at. And she was talking mostly about open endings, as opposed to, she talked about open endings as opposed to closed endings. And then she also talked about what makes a satisfying ending. And she was talking mainly from a film perspective, but I think I think he addresses that here. Anytime you're writing a story, anytime you're telling a story, how you end is as important, if not more so, than how you begin.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Even with the series, like for instance, with the Hunger Games, so many people were disappointed with how that the trilogy ended, and I think that sometimes those negative feelings kind of override the everything else. It's like the first book, The Hunger Games itself, was incredible. Everyone loved that book. So I think that endings are incredibly important. And I'm glad that we decided to read this book.
Yes.
What did you think about his writing? Did you find it engaging? Were you put off by it? Was there anything that you kind of didn't really understand or agree with? How about that? With just the craft of the book itself?
I'll be honest, I read it in like 2 nights. I had intended to be like really good about this and like, I'll read it like carefully over the course of like a couple of weeks. And then I forgot until I think we talked about it or something. And I was like, oh crap, I haven't finished reading that. And I'd read like the first 3 pages or first three chapters, maybe the first 2 chapters. And then last weekend, I was like, I got to read this. So I meant to read like a couple of chapters every day, but I ended up reading it in like 2 sessions. And I really, once I got into it and was focusing on what he was talking about, not just like trying to absorb words, I liked how he presented. I liked how he presented the information. I liked that he started by acknowledging that endings are hard and then built on that. Like that to me was a really good foundation. And from there it got better.
I tend to agree. I liked that he pulled from a lot of different resources. He talked about books, and he talked about movies, and he talked about a wide spectrum of genres, and they were all pretty popular works, so that it made it easier to apply what he was saying, because you probably have read a few of the books that he's mentioned, you know?
Yeah.
So I liked that. Even though with some of the other books that we've read, they've talked in terms of other indies. It was nice to hear about stuff that you were familiar with, basically.
Yeah. And that you have more of a frame of reference. As my mother, the teacher, says, you have hooks to hang that on.
I like the fact that he went, you know, anytime he'd give you an example, he did something that was newer, as well as even going to a classic. So he could show you, like, not just the now, but throughout history, this has been done. It's not just something that's new and a fad. So.
And it's done he came from talking about a sense of excellence rather than modern books do this. He was like, no, excellence is across the board. And he was very clear about that. And I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I
am interested in reading one of his books now, one of his fiction books, just to see.
Yeah.
Is he practicing what he's preaching?
Yeah, and that's always the question, isn't it? Like, every time you read somebody's how-to, that's always a thing for me. And strangely enough, it's not something I ever thought about before I joined the AuthorTube community.
Yeah, I understand that. It's changed the way you look at books, basically. You're thinking about it more as a writer.
Well, and then before we started like this writing group, the only real person I had really ever thought about reading their work versus their nonfiction how-to was like Joanna Penn. But as we create more and we read more books, I'm like, there really are a lot of writers that teach too that I have no clue what if they preach what they do. So
right.
Let's see. All right. So one of the things that he talked about was, I have my notes over here, by the way. Leaning over to the side. One of the things he talked about, because I can't remember crap. He talks about knowing your ending before you write it, essentially. So I haven't done that before. I'm not a big planner. I'll have maybe a super vague idea of how the ending is going to be, but it's never anything concrete. Do you two plan your endings? And if you don't, do you think you might try it now?
You know, with Unknown Love, like I said, it started from the idea of the ending. So I thought I could pants my way to the ending, and I got about halfway through, and I ended up like trashing half the novel. And I had to go back and actually outline it because there was no way A was going to get to Z the way it was going. But I didn't for Unknown Family, and I think I just got lucky. So for Unknown Happiness, I've had to outline.
I usually have no idea where the story's going, which gets me into trouble. And I think that's one of the problems I have, is that I get to the end and I'm like, well, we're kind of there, but I don't know really how to, like, how do I, and he talks about this, how do you tie up the loose ends? And I'll end up with like thousands of loose ends. And I'm like, okay, well, I should probably do something about those. And then I'll set it aside and I'll be like, I'll fix it and edit. That's my excuse. I'll fix it and edit. I'll fix it and edit. So I'm working on, I'm going to be working on two new series this summer. And one of the things that I'm doing is making comprehensive outlines for each of them where before I start writing, I do know what the ending is and moving from there, because I don't know if it's that I don't understand storytelling well enough yet, or if my brain just doesn't work that way, but I do so much better. I feel so much better about the outlines I've done. Obviously, I haven't tried writing them yet, but we're going to see how it works.
Well, and I like the way that he references Stephen King. He goes, "Why worry about the ending? Sooner or later, every story comes out somewhere." And I read that, and I'm like, "But does it though? If you have a lot of loose ends, like, unless you're gonna make it like a spin-off or to be continued, I don't know that that's right."
I mean,
Or if
it does come out somewhere, it doesn't mean that it's the right place that it comes out. Or, do you want to come out and it's like a beautiful, like, lakeside place, or do you want to come out into an industrial wasteland where nothing can grow and prosper?
Right.
It was, I don't know, it was just one of those weird ones I had to think about, because I watch a lot of Stephen King and things about him, and I had never heard him say that one before. So I was like, how can he write so well and his endings be so perfect if he has that kind of mentality?
On the other hand, I wonder if, and this is something that I think Chris, what's his name? The guy we read last time.
Yeah, not the name that I couldn't remember, even when we were talking about
Chris, whatever his last name is. Cannot think of it right now. I'm having a moment.
I'm like looking in my notebook for all my notes.
He's there somewhere. But he talked about understanding story structure in, I think it's in his plot gardening book. Although it may have been in the one we read. I don't remember. I read too many of them last month.
I know, right?
But he talks about understanding story. Fox. There it is. Thank you, Shannon.
I was like going through my books now.
He talks about understanding story structure well in order to write on the fly. And some people have a natural understanding. And I think Stephen King is one of those people who has a natural understanding of story structure and how to weave things together. Sarah understands story structure. Now, that doesn't mean that everything they write comes out absolutely perfect, but they understand structure enough that I think for them, subconsciously, they can write without.
Yeah, it's already in their head, so they write it like that already.
Even if they're not consciously aware of it, it's like I can sit down at a piano and play through chord progressions without thinking. I don't have to think about what chord's going to come next, except in do I want to do a major or minor? It flows because I understand chord progressions and chord structures so well that it can just be part of how I play. And I think that when any kind of art is like this, there are painters and sculptors and graphic artists who can do this. But I think it does take time and it takes training, and you have to spend a significant amount of time focusing on learning story structure to the point where it becomes second nature. And I don't know that, I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
So an outline is the way I do that without driving myself insane.
And I think that Stephen King is a big proponent of rewriting.
Yes.
So, he had, and I'm sure that he has rewritten his novels so many times, and he's written so many novels at this point. So he has his whole thing down to a science, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure his zero draft is nothing like mine.
Right.
Mine is riddled with potholes and cliffhangers and sadness. And I'm sure I would love to start wherever he does,
Strings blowing in the wind.
so many strings. Where did this
You're
character come from? I don't know.
I was talking with some friends the other day about when I was in high school and just out of high school, I spent a lot of time writing romance novels because that's what I read. And so I really wanted to write romance novels. But I struggled with sex scenes a lot. I was like that I had no experience and I didn't know how to write them. And they made me feel very awkward. So I just would skip them. And I'll come back to it and edit. That is my number one excuse. I'll come back to it and edit. But I gave a novel to a friend of mine to beta read. And her top 2 comments were, so this particular character that shows up and is really like important in the first 3 chapters is never heard from again. And I think he took chapter 7 with him. And I was like, what? And she was like, there's a page titled chapter 7. There's nothing else on it. And then the next page is chapter 8. And I was like, oh.
That was the next chapter.
Like, that's where they were supposed to have sex, but I didn't know how to write it. So.
Precious baby.
I know. It was so sad. To be fair, I don't know that I could write a sex scene now. I'd have to, like, it would take a lot of effort.
But, you know, sweet romance is a thing.
It is, if that's what you're trying to write. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I have at least one in one of my upcoming novels that I'm outlining this summer. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think that the whole idea of strings and then you have to figure out where they fit, that is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that he was talking about that I liked the idea of was like, and you've probably, you know, I don't think this is a new concept, or at least it wasn't a new concept to me. The idea that, you know, as the author, you have to be feeling the emotions so that the reader will feel it as well. And he brought up playlists, which I was like, huh. So that's not just something that, you know, the non-professionals do. Like, do you guys have a playlist that goes along with whatever you're writing now? Or like, if you're trying to evoke a certain emotion, do you have something that you fall back on?
I don't know per book that I do, but like when I'm writing, depending on the type of scene, I do have like sad music here, battle music here, like type of thing that I listen to on Pandora's Journey. So I don't know that I could write without it.
Yes, same. Same. Like, I don't use Pandora. I use
on YouTube there's a channel called Pandora Journey, and they it like has epic battle music and then sad scene music, and it's just quick and easy to go to.
I may have to look that up. I mostly over the years, this is going to date me so bad, in Windows Media Player, I've collected all of my music there, and it's all in carefully curated what do you call those?
Playlists?
Thank you, playlists. And then I do keep them in folders so that, like, when I move to a new computer, I can just move them over. And I add to them every now and again, but yeah, it's a lot of, I have a really hard time listening to music with words. So it has to be instrumental only. It has to be like soft enough that it's background music. So it's not like overwhelming me. But yeah.
Yeah, I can't do music with words either when I'm writing.
With Blood Roses and Honeysuckles, it took place in the 90s. So I had a 90s playlist of songs that I thought my main character would listen to.
Nice.
And so in order to get myself back into like 1994, I would listen to that playlist kind of like if when I was editing and when I was trying to get into the mood to draft. But I can't listen to words when I'm drafting, because I will most certainly put words from the song
Yep.
into the draft. Happens every single time, and then I'm going and looking over that last paragraph I just wrote. I felt like I had a really good sentence there, and all of a sudden there's like, I don't know, some random unskinny bop or something in there. I'm like, wait, where did you? Why? And what was supposed to be here?
And that's why I can't listen to music with words. I've done that so many times.
Yes.
I cut it out.
It's like, no, okay. I figured myself out enough to know this doesn't work
Yep.
for me. So I end up listening to there's a few like chill out stations on YouTube that like live stream music all the time. And I just listen to that just so that I can have like just like background noise essentially, so I can block out the sounds of like neighbor kids yelling and honking horns and everything else,
Which is very important. I feel like,
Yeah.
regardless of whether
Like
siren.
sirens, you know.
Although to be honest, we've lived here long enough that I don't. Now that I would notice, but if we're not streaming, I don't notice it. It's part of the background noise here. But I know that like Sarah uses white noise often. I know that that's something that people can do. I have problems with lyrics because I end up singing and not writing.
Oh yeah.
And singing leads to dancing, and dancing leads to procrastinating, which is not helpful.
Let's see. Well, I'm trying to read what this says.
It's bad when you can't read your own handwriting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So one thing that I really liked about this book, that even though his focus was lasered in on writing like the best last 50 pages that you possibly could, and he even mentioned writing scripts too, or like looking at movies. But anyway, but I like that he also talked about how to, like, for instance, those threads they're dangling, to like look at your ending and then going back to the middle and to the beginning and planting seeds there so that you have a little bit of foreshadowing or something that'll lead to that end. So he talked about structuring that sloppy middle, even though he was focusing on the end, he talks about the middle too. And I think that, I mean, granted, writing is just hard, but I think that especially if you are someone who is mostly kind of pantsing it, then your middle can be like an ungodly jungle of just mess. And personally, I enjoy all the tips to make my middle better. Give them all to me, please.
When I was reading something, they were talking about and again, this was about storytelling, and that storytelling has to have connections throughout. And so it can't just be a series of snapshots or a beginning that's really exciting and an ending that's really exciting, but they don't connect in any way. And what happens in the middle is just and then. It has to be, the middle has to connect. Like, the purpose of the middle is to connect to the beginning and the ending. And sometimes we forget that, because the middle can be really boring to write. Like, oh, no.
Well, and I think
it feels like it can drag on.
Yeah. And I think when you're pantsing, you don't always know where your middle is going to end up being.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you will drone on, and that's when he says go back and find your mirror moment and in the middle, and then that helps it stand out and helps it define that is the middle. And I mean that helps the end because you know how the transformation is going to happen.
Right.
Mirror moment. I didn't write down that definition.
When you're
I did because I wanted to remember it. There are two types. Think self-reflecting inner transformation, and odds against you are greater to win over. The character finds courage. So like the inner struggle or the outer struggle, where they're reflecting on themselves.
He talked a lot about having those kind of transformation moments and how important it is. Basically, he was talking about character arc and how important for your character to develop in some sort of way. And it doesn't always have to be in an obvious way. And with sometimes with the plot, it'll work for it more to be like everything around that character to transform and the character has stayed the same. But most often,
That's what I was saying. Is that her or us?
oh, did I disappear?
You froze for a minute.
I glitched.
We heard most often.
Well, at least it didn't cut off, so we're doing okay. Yeah, so character arcs, changes, stuff
keep
like
talking.
that.
I gotta go. I'll be right.
Okay. So he talks about the mirror moment. There was some other advice that he was giving about transformation in his book that I found really helpful. But I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to go through all the specifics because I think that kind of.
Yeah. Well, I like the way he talked about laying the right foundation, and he used that lock, being the four things you need in the novel. The lead, objective struggle, confrontation, and knockout ending. I think I remember something like that. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know, abbreviations, whatever you want to call them for things, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I found that one a lot easier to remember because you want to lock down a great ending, so you want to, have those four things. So I probably will remember that one a lot easier than some of the other ones we read that had the abbreviations.
Yeah, so. He had a lot of acronyms, y'all.
That's the word. I keep saying abbreviations, acronyms. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Thank you.
No problem. You'll probably supply me with the word in a little bit.
I prefer the word mnemonic.
Oh,
a mnemonic device. Because that covers acronyms. It covers like we use it. I use it a lot when I teach. So like when kids are learning the lines and spaces on the staffs, each one has a mnemonic that goes with it. So like in the treble clef, the spaces spell face, F-A-C-E. And that's one type of mnemonic. But then you have the lines are every good boy does fine. So that's an acronym-ish. It's a phrase, but it's a mnemonic phrase. So face is the acronym, and anyway. But yeah,
for whatever reason,
mnemonic devices.
For whatever reason, acronym did not come to my head, so I just used the first word that did.
Data's in the comments. Acronym.
Sorry, guys. I have been working on my house already today. The heat has gotten to my brain. You're good. Sorry, fried. And it's only 1:30.
Apparently my mom just came in and asked me where the jigsaw was. I was like, I put all the tools you gave me to keep in the trash can by the door. She goes, great. It's not there. Guess I sold it. See you later.
Oh, no.
So now she's got to go get one.
Yikes.
I agree. My sisters have both worked for Wells Fargo in their home mortgage section. And when they talk about work, they talk in acronyms. Like, and I'm just there like,
oh no.
See, and I was in the
I
military.
have no idea what you're talking about.
You'd think I wouldn't forget that word was an acronym, but I guess I just talk in them so much I forget that it's an acronym. It's just another word.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's part of what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to help you remember those things. But yeah.
When you talk to them for 8 years, you know their words.
I like that he's a thriller writer.
Mm-hmm.
So there was quite a few things about thrillers and mysteries that he drew from that I don't often see, because it seems like people are talking more from like a sci-fi fantasy spectrum, which is fine and it's still valuable, but it was nice that I felt like, oh, we're talking a little bit about some stuff that I need to work on, so that's cool.
Yeah, there's a connection there, and I'm working on a mystery series right now, and that was helpful for me. That connection was, yes, I agree.
There was a book that he mentioned called Writing a Thriller that he referenced that I'm going to look up. I made a note. I was like, look this up, Writing a Thriller. See if I can find it on the cheap.
Yeah, and he writes a lot of thrillers too, so I feel like that was kind of his God, words today. His little niche area he knew a lot about. Like, there was hardly any romance or anything like I write about. So this was definitely y'all's book as far as referencing, but yeah, it definitely had a lot of good things even without that part.
Yeah. Has anyone in the comments, do you have any questions or any thoughts, or let us know? I see a lot of you enjoy playlists with your writing too, and Shannon likes to enjoy the silence.
Is that the sound of silence?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Sorry, my back is killing me.
Oh, you're fine.
Yes. I can speak to that. Yes, Tracy, I would definitely recommend this book. For me, it was incredibly helpful. I have a lot of books, craft books about like dialogue and character development and editing, and like those are helpful. But having one that's dedicated just to how to write endings, that was very helpful. And he presents it in a very simple way I could go back and read this. I could go back and reread it, or go to a section if I'm like, okay, I remember he was talking about this thing. How do I do it? And I can go back and I can find it fairly easily. So yes.
Yeah, it was over 100 pages. So that's important to me. I don't have a lot of time to read extremely long books where people are going on and on. I like having these craft books that kind of get in, get out, tell you what's up, teach you a thing, that sends you on your way. So I appreciated that. And, it had a lot of things that I found really helpful. At first, I was like, this doesn't really sound like it's going to be my cup of tea. But as the book progressed, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I think the past books we've read had exercises that were helpful and everything like that, and helped you further along your writing and things. But this one actually gave you examples, so you could see, okay, well, this is what my book does compared to this example and things like that. And so where the other ones had exercises, I felt like these examples were equally as important. And kind of like CJ said, you can reference, okay, well, here he's talking about the middle and the foundation, and here he's talking about the structure at the end. So it was easily quick to just go back and go, okay, that's the chapter I need to reread type thing. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But because the book is so short, I don't feel like I don't want to go too in depth about it because then I feel like we're kind of stealing the opportunity for you guys to learn from it
Right,
yourselves.
right.
And I really think
Yeah.
it is helpful. And it wasn't expensive. What was it, $3.99 or $4.99 or something?
Yeah, I think it was $4.99. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really, it was quite reasonable.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's worth the $5. Is there anything that y'all want to say before we close it? I know we're closing a little earlier today, but I think that's okay.
I'm okay with that. My
Yeah.
landlord is here to look at our washer,
Oof.
which crapped out yesterday.
Hopefully you can fix it.
I think overall, I like the book I like the fact that the book tells you not only about how to make great endings, but it also shows you for like people like me that have open endings or characters that are not quite, the strings aren't tied off because they're gonna get, pulled back in another novel. He also addressed that too, which I found very helpful because I didn't expect that in this. Just because it does talk about endings, I didn't expect him to talk about open-ended endings or characters. So that surprised me, and I found helpful, as well as just learning about how to make a good ending, because not all of my endings have every character and every string wrapped up, because it's going to get referenced and fixed in another book. So
Yeah, that was really helpful. I found it helpful again that because he is a thriller writer that he drew from kind of thriller / horror references, and he also talked about mystery things. And in some ways, the mystery and the thriller have a lot in common in mechanics and stuff. So, which I think that's why, just in my writing, I started with writing horror, and I've kind of transitioned into this cozy mystery realm, which sounds like it's a
really funny, yeah.
But I mean, there's some continuity here.
there's still some killing in there.
There's still murders. There, stuff happens.
There's still death and gore.
Yeah.
Okay, not gore, but
Less
still
gore,
death.
but plenty of death.
Yeah.
Plenty of death and
sometimes more death when it's a cozy.
Yeah,
that's true.
Cozies are really bloody. They just don't, like, the blood doesn't drip for the pages like it does in the
Right.
There's more intrigue instead of running from the killer.
Right.
Yeah. So, you might have a little bit of run sometimes. Oh, that was one thing that he talked about. Like having that, like, I don't know, what was the word that he used? I can't remember the phrase, but I was thinking of like kind of like a come to Jesus moment where your main character, if it's going to have like a tragic ending, then this is when the character is like, okay, well, I guess this is where things end. They resign themselves to their fate, whether their negative fate, even whether or not it actually ends up being a negative.
Oh, ending. Knowing the shape of your ending, the lead wins or loses.
Yeah. I like,
and that was I think that was really important. I agree. That was because it never occurs to me, and mostly probably because of the kind of literature I've always read and the kind of literature I write. I always forget that it's okay to let your lead lose. Like, that is an okay ending. And that's a really, like, for me, that's a little scary because I like the happy endings. But
yeah,
I think it's really good that he included that and said, not only is this okay, sometimes that's how a story has to end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not everything can have a happily ever after, unless it's like straight up romance. Please don't come up in your romance and have, the couple like not get together and they cheat on each other and stuff falls out and you call it a romance, because romance readers will come for you.
Yeah, they will. They will come for your head.
they get mad.
Well, and I think a lot of times we think when we hear about a lead losing, we think death, but it doesn't have to be like that. He gave a couple examples, where they lost, but just because they lost something essential to them, or lost their faith in something, or they lost something essential, so doesn't always mean death.
Well, and like I don't think he talked about this, but it made me think about I just finished rereading the Lord of the Rings trilogy again. And
it's on TV today.
Is it?
Yeah.
I've only ever seen Fellowship. No, I think I've seen part of Two Towers, but
we just
but
watched the first two Hobbits before we got off.
Oh, I can't. Nope.
She's got feelings.
I have feelings about the video versions of The Hobbit. But at the end of Return of the King, Frodo, who's been the hero through this whole thing, he loses. Like, he doesn't get to go home and live a long, happy life. He talks about being mortally wounded, and it's a wound that won't heal. And so he has to go off to the Grey Lands. And while he completes the mission that he was set up for, so there was success, and he has honor, and he has, great fame, he also loses his good name in the Shire. He loses the ability to live longer than, I think he's like 52 when he goes off to the Grey Lands. So he loses all of these things that he was fighting so hard for. But I think that ending, Tolkien did a really good job of setting up the ending, because in the first book, Frodo talks about, he thinks he can go on this journey even if he never gets to come home, because he knows that he is doing it to save his home. So he's okay with losing his home if he can save it. And I think that's that kind of that losing, the hero losing something essential, is as resonant, if not more, than the hero gaining happily ever after.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you. It's and it gives his character, like, it makes him a stronger character. It makes him more relatable. It makes him more real. Because when you think over your life, how many times do you have like the perfect, happy everything that happens? That's very, very rare. More normally it's, or at least in my life, it's like there's happy stuff, but there's a lot of other things too that kind of can temper down that happiness a little bit. And you know what I mean? Like, it makes it poignant. It makes it still difficult. It makes it reality,
It doesn't erase the hardship.
Right.
And I think sometimes happy endings can do that, is erase the hardship. And I was thinking about this as he was talking about Casablanca. He was talking about Casablanca. And how there's Rick both wins and loses. I mean, there's a kind of winning, but he really gives up he sort of loses. I just saw Tracy's Romance Landia will murder you. Sorry, the comments distracted me.
Straight facts.
But I went back and I thought about my favorite books, the ones that I've enjoyed the most. And most of the time, they have bittersweet endings. They're not entirely, like, they're not horribly sad. Like, the ones that are horribly sad, like, I close it and I'm like, well, fuck you too, book. I hate you and everything you stand for, and I'm never reading you again. But the ones that I pick up and I read over and over and over again, often I think about Harry Potter is like this. They win, but there is so much death and so much destruction at the end.
Oh my gosh.
And I like every time, but the second half of the last book of that series, I cried through the whole thing every time I read it. And I'm just Lord of the Rings is like that. What's the one I just no, it's not on that shelf. The Dark Tower series. Stephen King's Dark Tower series is like like the ending of that just I'm like, oh
yeah.
And there's some really good things in the ending, but yeah, and I think that those stories resonate with us because we do understand, especially as adults, we understand that there is really no such thing as a perfect ending where no one dies, no one gets hurt, and everybody's happy at the end. That doesn't happen. And so when you get those tend to be reserved for like children's books, where we can pretend still.
Pretending. I want to pretend that everything works out.
Right?
So this has been wonderful, and I really appreciate y'all being here. Alina's internet, it was her turn for her internet to be a jerk face. So, shout out to her. Hopefully I think they're supposed to come tomorrow and fix their stuff, which was exactly what happened to me like the last time when I had to cancel. And poor Sky's ill. So I'm glad that we were all internet ready and feeling good ish and could make it. So why don't you all tell where they could find you and all that good stuff, and if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share, feel free to do so.
I've got Unknown Love, of course, available on Amazon in paperback and ebook form. My website's just amberscraft.com if you want to learn about the books coming up. And I had a video come up yesterday, so go check that out. And then later tonight, once this is done, so cats can't crawl through floors in the house, I'll have a live stream right in tonight, so probably about 10 o'clock Central.
Right. I have the South Deer Island Chronicles, which is a free serial over on Tumblr. And right now, that's about it.
Sounds good. And you're always around for Sarah's streams that are every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
8 Eastern, 7 Central. Yes.
Yeah.
And the links for our channels and live streams and all that good happy goodness is down in the description. And I appreciate y'all coming out on this Saturday to talk with us. My name's Tamara, and this is my channel where I talk about writing and books. And we do this thing the last Saturday of every month, because basically I have a whole bunch of writing books and I never read them. And this is when peer pressure is good, because I can't come on here in front of this camera in y'all's faces and pretend like I read the book if I haven't. It just doesn't work out. So peer pressure is great for this. I actually have written down some books for us to vote on. So we'll be releasing what book we're doing next this upcoming week. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I have several videos that I have recorded and haven't edited yet, but my fiance called me out. So I'm on it. I've edited one. I'm going to post that to Patreon as soon as we get off of here. And then I'm going to be editing some more. And soon my editor will have the second half of the book. Things are happening, y'all. And I'll be here doing Camp NaNoWriMo starting Monday. Also, how is it almost July? What?
I don't know.
Am I just that old? The time is just escaping me.
It's just going way too fast.
Yikes.
Yep.
Period.
It was just January, I swear.
Yeah.
Right? Gee, Christmas. So, yeah. thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, ladies, for joining me. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.